Welcome to Introspection, the podcast about moving from grief to growth. I'm Amy Lindner Lesser, your host. Introspection started out as a podcast about hospitality, innkeeping, and innkeepers. After about a year, I realized that my life and interests have morphed from hospitality to helping others navigate from grief and loss to growth and living. In this new version of Introspection, I will be talking about my personal experiences with loss, and there are quite a few, what I've learned along the way through my professional training, as well as from my coaching experiences. I'll also be bringing in guests to share interesting ideas. So grab a beverage, find a comfy place, take a deep breath, and listen in. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Introspection, Grief to Growth. I'm Amy Lindner Lesser, your host, and I'm really glad you're back with me. So today I thought I would talk about loss. That as Americans mostly, our society has not set us up to deal with loss or grief. We do a great job of teaching us to acquire and get more things and build more, but we're not equipped to deal with what happens when we lose those things, whether it's a person or a job or an actual thing. We are just expected, just get over it. Well, that's easier said than done. And to be honest, that's not very great advice. We don't just get over things. Things take a while to process. And I thought it would be helpful to share parts of a conversation that I had last week with a few women when I asked them what kind of grief have they experienced, what kind of losses have they experienced in their life. What was fascinating to me was that these four women, none of them had experienced a very close death other than, a grandparent. I think all of them still had their parents. And the losses that they talked about were fascinating. They were ones that they said they didn't even realize that they were going through. For example, one of the women was discharged from the service. She left. I'm not sure the exact happenings, but she left the service and had a baby, got married, not necessarily in that order. And because she left the service, she also moved. Those are four huge things that happened in her life, each one of which is a loss. So having a baby, even though you may be very excited about being a parent for the first time, for the second, for the fifth, whatever it is, it also represents a loss. Having a baby represents loss of freedom. If you have a partner that you're involved with, it involves changing the relationship with that partner. And please forgive the people walking behind me. I'm at a conference this week, and you can see there's a flip chart there behind me, and there's some staff setting up for our dinner tonight. So they may be walking past us. Having a baby is a huge loss, at the same time that it's a huge gain. Being discharged from the service, you've been living a life where somebody tells you when to wake up, what to wear, how to make your bed, where to go at any particular point in time, how to behave at any particular point in time. When you leave that structure, you don't have it. You have to figure those things out for yourself. You've also lost the friendships. Even though they may continue, they're continuing in a different way. Moving. When you move from one house to another, whether it's your own house, the barracks, or your parents' house, or even a dorm, you're losing what's familiar to you. We need to come up with new ways to deal with the unfamiliar and setting up new structures for ourselves, new ways to deal with things. And you do miss what you had before. We miss the familiar. We miss the friends. We miss the support. That support may take longer or be at more of a distance than what it's been in your current state. We talked about what happens when you or a loved one, a child, is given a diagnosis. It doesn't mean necessarily a diagnosis of a terminal illness. It could mean the diagnosis of a learning disability or an emotional or psychological difference. And parents will grieve. The child, depending on their age, will grieve, learning that they may have to do something different. They may have to live their lives in a different way. A parent may have to give up dreams that they had for their child. For example, a child might be diagnosed, for example, with a math learning disability. And maybe the parent was an engineer and they had hoped that that child would go into that same career, or an accountant. And not a possibility, probably. When a child or an adult goes through gender affirmation surgery, or even the process before surgery, where they change their gender to what they feel that they should have been rightfully born as. Everybody involved goes through loss. And often there's no support for parents of adult children. They may be adults, but they're still your child. And also for a spouse. What do you do when your wife or your husband tells you that they've been in the wrong body all along? There's a huge grief process. It could be that the loss for you is you're changing a job. And I want to talk about the change that you request. So you've been excited, you have a new job coming, you're going to work in a new place, and there are new people and new challenges. You're really excited about that new job. But wait a minute, I'm losing the familiarity of the job I go to now. I'm losing my coworkers who I go out to lunch with a few times a week. I'm losing the familiar boss. May not like the boss that much, but you know the saying, the devil I know. So what happens? You've got loss and grief to deal with. What about just the difference in your commute? Maybe your new job is 15, 20 minutes further from your house. Another thing, there's unfamiliar territory. There's sitting in the car. What do I do for that time? How do I get home to my kids? Or how do I get back? Do I have to deal with rush hour? These are all types of grief. And many of them are the kinds that we don't think about. We usually concentrate on death. And I want to let people know, I want you to all know that, first of all, loss is inevitable. None of us live forever, and nothing is permanent. Everything can change. And because of that, it's all a very natural part of life that we need to get used to experiencing and learn how to build that muscle, how to build that resilience. It's normal, part of life, and yet it's different for every single one of us. That each loss each thing we grieve is a different reaction. It's a different set of emotions. It may take more time with one loss than the other loss because there's nothing known to anyone. There is no such thing as a standard path. It's not like I hand you a map that I've drawn that has only one way to go from point A to point B. The reality is that grief and loss are like working through either the old-fashioned fold-up kind of map where there are many different routes to get you eventually to a place that you've decided you want to go, or even modern day with a GPS. I can program my GPS to say, I don't want toll roads, or don't take me over a bridge, or I don't like highways, or I only want to go on highways. I want to get there the fastest way possible. There's still multitude of ways to go. It's not one route to get there. And as with maps and directions to places, I know my GPS tells me if you choose this route, it's going to be 45 minutes longer than the other route. We don't have a time limit. We don't know how long it's going to take us when we're dealing with a loss. Some of it depends on how many losses we've had to deal with and how recent other losses were and how significant the loss is. The other thing that's fascinating to me is that each loss, because of the relationship we have with the other person or thing, each one is different. So if I were, for example, a twin, and maybe even an identical twin, and my twin sister and I both lost our father, each one of us would respond to that loss in a different way. Because even though we may have the same genetics, we've had different experiences with that father. We had different relationships with him. And we have other relationships and other losses that we may not have shared. You know, if we were in different school classes or even in different schools, we would have different teachers and different relationships with them, different friends and different relationships with them. We would have had arguments and hurts with different people. We may have had a pet that we loved differently, and that pet's loss would be grieved in a different way. So grief is individual. It has no timeline, and each time it's going to be different. Don't compare grief because it will never be the same twice. Some people don't even grieve immediately. That I can tell you from my own personal experience. When my husband passed, and he had been sick for a while, I thought I had done all of my grieving while he was ill. He did have cancer. We knew it was serious. I knew at the pit of my stomach and in my heart that it was terminal. And so as he was going through his treatments and his disease was progressing, and as he was dying, I was going through what I thought was my grieving process. I was preparing myself for a life as a widow, as a single parent, as a single business owner. And yes, I mourned his death. I grieved. And I thought a few months later that I had done really well. I was functioning. I was a member of society. I was running my business. I was talking with guests. And to meet me, you probably wouldn't have known. And then about a year later, a friend's mother died. I had never met his mother. And yet, when I went to the funeral as support for him, I sat there sobbing. Because what happened was I was re-experiencing or experiencing the grief I had over my husband's death and many years before, my dad's grief, his loss. And then later on, there was another loss, and it happened. And it wasn't until I really put in more work and a lot of work with a program that I offer now called the Grief Recovery Method, which helped me come to completion with the relationship. Now, it doesn't end the grief. It helps process it, and it helps to put it sort of in a pocket. And there are still times that there are things that will trigger and the grief will come back. It won't be as severe. It won't cripple me for days. Yet it's a reminder to me that there's an emptiness from what was. And even when I look at moving from my house or our house in Pennsylvania to our inn when we bought it in Massachusetts, I still will sometimes feel the loss of the friends that I had there. I loved my house and I loved my community and my friends. And while I also loved my house and the inn and my life in the Berkshires, it was a different experience. And there are things that I miss to this day, 2 years after leaving the inn, too. And I don't know how many, 27 years, I think, after leaving our house in Pennsylvania. So I liken grief and loss and the fact that it stays with you. You know, it's a reminder of the love and the good feelings that you had about that relationship forever. Because if you don't care about something, you don't miss it. It's not a loss when it goes away. What I liken it to, though, is I liken it to wearing glasses. And I think I got glasses for the first time when I was in third grade, but I only needed them to read the board or to read to read the board. And then when I was in my 20s, I had an eye exam and I had to wear glasses all the time. And it was really hard to learn to remember to put them on my face. That I would leave the house and I'd forget that I didn't have them, or I would have them in my purse and forget to put them on. And, after a while, it became second nature. I didn't even notice that I was wearing them. And then I got progressive lenses. And all of a sudden, because the experience of wearing progressive lenses made me dizzy because things seemed like they were moving at different speeds, I was really conscious of wearing my glasses. And after a few weeks, a month or so, I got used to those and it didn't matter. Then I had cataract surgery in one eye, and I only needed my glasses for close-up, which is why I'm wearing them, so I can see the camera and I can see you. It's still like sometimes I'll put them on my head and forget that I have them. Sometimes I will take them off because I'm doing something else and I forget where I put them because I don't need them all the time. That's sort of like what grief is, that after you get past the initial, however long that takes, stages of being in the depth of grief, it stays alongside you. It stays in your pocket. It's the keys that you have in your pocket that every once in a while stab you. They remind you that they're there. And it does eventually get easier, and it's there. And remind yourself that you're exactly where you need to be at this moment in time. And when you're ready to take the next step and say, I'm ready to go back into dealing with my life as it is today, I'm ready to move forward and to grow again and to start living your life fully and with joy, I'm here for you. You can find the contact information in the information below, and I look forward to being able to help you navigate from loss through grief to growth and joy. Thanks for listening in. And by the way, there's a new Facebook group that I've started. I'd love to have you join the Facebook group. You can find it here too. Thanks a lot. See you next time. Love you. Bye. If you liked what you heard on this podcast and want to hear more, please follow us and tell your friends. You can also find me on Facebook at Amy Lindner Lesser, Grief to Growth Life Coaching, and on LinkedIn at Amy Lindner Lesser. Thanks again.